This program contains strong adult language, violence, and brief nudity. It's everything you're looking for. Live from the Sims Tower in the Robinson Auto Group studio, we are AM 1600 WKKX.
Check. There we go. Hello, everybody. We got her working. Welcome to Whispers Radio here on AM 1600, WKKX, the Valley's Watchdog, and UPRN, the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. It is... I don't know all the... What time is it, Lola?
It is 6:08, and it is finally getting nice. The wind has quit. And I know you were telling me that...
no, I never got even...
You didn't get hit with the wind, but... Boy, I sure did. As soon as that storm front moved in, hey, why is she barking now? She has not barked since she walked in this place, and now she decides to bark.
Yeah, I never got any wind in Bridgeport.
Well, and straight up 70. I mean, I'm just right up 70 from you. It got hit our house, I mean, literally, the windows were rattling, and then it started to really rain, and the wind kind of died. But that first movement of the front, whatever the hell that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. That thing that happens. What is she looking at?
You?
Oh, she can't see.
She probably heard Dougie leave.
Well, I have to yell at my dog. Wait a minute.
Well, I have some good news. And I'm going to say it just because I am the happiest man in the world.
I know.
Right now.
See, you're killing me. You're killing me with this.
I know.
Go ahead.
She's all about the superstition, and I don't care. I told you last week on March 20th, Sarah and I got married.
Yeah.
She's not here right now. She's out with my sister. We found out Friday night that I'm going to be a daddy.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm going to be an auntie.
Auntie Lola. Her name is Lola.
I love being an aunt because that you can give me that baby and I will spoil. Here she rotten, and then the minute here she cries, "Hey guys, here."
Take her back. I'm kind of hoping for a boy though.
You'll take what God gives you.
No, I will. But boys have a lot cooler toys.
That's true, unless you decide to raise a tomboy. See?
True story. Come on, we're going to go play trucks.
Yeah. I played trucks. We played army, all that kind of stuff. I was an athlete. I didn't become a lady until quite late in life.
Really? See, Sarah was a tomboy.
See?
Yeah, she turned into a lady.
I can guarantee you that one of the first gifts I give you will be some type of sporting apparel.
Hey. It works.
Girl or boy, that's what everybody gets.
Works for me.
Like little Red Wings onesies or...
Penguins, maybe.
Well, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Nailers?
Okay, that's a compromise.
Okay.
That's a compromise. And you'll be living South Carolina.
Yeah.
So, let's see, the Jaguars, could always adopt them. Let me see, baseball.
I don't know what they got.
I don't either. I don't think.
They might not.
I don't know. That's weird.
We'll have to check into that.
Yeah. But yeah, that's all kinds of. Yeah.
I know college is big around there. College sports are huge down there.
Yeah.
So, we'll see.
Where's Gwinnett? No, that's Georgia. I'm pretty sure.
Where we'd be moving to isn't far from Georgia. We can get to Savannah in like 3 hours.
I love Savannah.
Mm-hmm.
We almost went there for vacation this last year.
Yeah.
Instead of New Orleans, if we hadn't been able to get the tickets for the playoff game, we were going to go to just take 4 or 5 days and go to Savannah. because we have been there before when we were taking that boat down to Florida.
Oh, it's beautiful there. It's probably one of the prettiest cities. There's a few
Charleston.
Like I really like Pittsburgh. I like when you go through the tunnel.
Yeah.
And it's like right when you get into the tunnel, and then as soon as you get out of the tunnel, it's this huge, beautiful city, and it's like I love that. Savannah, I love like the big trees covered in the Spanish moss and very like old school.
Yes. Charleston, South Carolina is like that too.
Never been.
Oh, it's almost like Savannah. It's that same kind of, because that's where we had the boat docked over Christmas. And so you've got Fort Sumter is there. And it was funny. It's like, it was only in the 60s, but let's face it, it was in the 30s in Michigan. So we're laying out on the boat trying to get a ticket. And these people are taking ferries out to the fort. And they're all looking over going, oh, wow, look at those crazy women. But it was, to us, it was really warm.
That's like, was it when it was starting to warm up for us, it was cold for them down there. But, I mean, it was still like 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
So Sarah and I went down there, and it's like a 50-degree day. We're like shorts, T-shirt, flip-flops. We're like, well, let's go out to the beach, and everybody else is like putting on a jacket. I'm like, what?
When we were in New Orleans, we went to the beach in Mississippi. And, nobody's on the beach. Here we are, shorts, flip-flops, tank tops. It's like, no, we're on a beach. We are not wearing clothes. I'm sorry, but we're not wearing clothes.
Well, I don't know. For those of you out there that are friends with me on Facebook, you see pictures of us. Like, I mean, we're shorts and T-shirt, because it is a little chilly, but we're splashing around in the water. I mean, we didn't go in above our knees, but we're jumping around in the water and we're playing with the dog, and it's, everybody else is like sitting on the beach. They're like looking at us like with their hoodies and jackets on. They're like, who are these crazy people? Well, we had a good time. So I don't know. I'll probably get like that one day. I'll be down there and be like, oh my gosh, it's 70. Put on your wind coat.
Oh, your first, after your first summer.
I don't know. It took my mom like 5 years.
Really?
And after 5 years now, she's like, oh, well, bundle up. It's a chilly 60 degrees out. I'm like.
That always cracks me up. My ex-husband will say, because he lives way down. He lives by Boca in Florida. And he'll write, oh, it's really cold today. It's 65. I'm thinking, it's really cold.
That's our summer.
It's 28.
Yeah. It's like, I remember during the winter, Mom was like, oh my gosh, it's supposed to get down to 42 tonight. And I was like,
the furnace is on.
I'm like, yeah, well, it was like -1 with wind chill last night. I don't want to hear about it.
Oh, I know. Well, Mike from Mesa will call. He's already called me once today. Because I dared to say that the Red Wings own the Coyotes. But anyway, he'll call and rubbing it in all the time because he's right outside of Phoenix, So it's chilly today. It's 70. Wow, I had to put on a shirt with sleeves. Really? You're going to pull that on me? I know.
Jeez. But yeah, so I'm going to be a daddy.
Yes,
so anybody, if you have any tips, get me on Facebook or whispers1600@gmail.com.
Here's a tip, Jordan. Don't listen to anybody. I'm serious. Go with your gut. You start trying to take all kinds of advice. You'll get so confused and you'll go, oh my God, I'm going to be a terrible parent because I can't get. Just go with your gut. You'll
See,
know how
the way
to
I
do
figure,
it.
like cave people had babies.
That's
and they
right.
didn't mess it up too bad, the ones that lived.
Well, but see, there were external circumstances to those.
But I mean, people continued on, so I can't mess it up too much. You're not trying to dry
the baby's hair by putting it in the clothes dryer. Well, we'll just put it on tumble for a minute or so. Yeah.
Put some blankets in there.
You will be fine. It's when you start trying to read all these child psychology books and you're taking advice from this side and that side.
See, but that's what my degree's in.
Well, now I really know. Do not.
and after all that, like everything that's happened, I'm like, oh my God, I better Google it. Like the whole education's out the window, and I need to figure it out. Today, we're going to talk about the multiverse. We have author Stephen Manley. We are talking about the visions of the multiverse, which is his book. Stephen, are you with us?
I am. I was sitting there listening in and listening to you talking about your impending fatherhood, I guess. Is that what oh, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
You know, I was listening to the advice given to you, and I remember the time when I was worried about one of my kids having a cold, and we took the kid to the doctor, and the doctor checks out the kid and then looks at us and says, well, what do you think? And I remember thinking, you're asking me? You're the doctor. And I think I even said something. He sort of shrugged, and he said, you know, there comes a point where you really know the kid, and you know if they're hurting, or you know them better than any doctor does after a while.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think there's a lot to be said about, you know, advice is good, but after a while, you'll know them better than anybody else will.
Man, it's crazy. I guess she's starting to get the cravings. I had to bring her, like, pickles and ice cream. She ate them separate, thank God.
That's classic.
But she was craving. She's like, I don't know. I think I'm hungry. What do you want? Bring me a pickle and ice cream.
Just a word of warning on this one. Mine was hot fudge ice cream cakes from Big Boy, and after 3 months, my doctor put me on a diet because I took that old adage of eating for two. Man, I could have birthed the whole baseball team for what I gained. So, you know.
See, my sister and my sister-in-law are both pregnant too, and my sister, I asked her earlier today, and she says she craves the chili slaw dogs, and she'll eat them like crazy.
Well, my mom says with her it was hamburgers and onion and peanut butter all mixed up.
Oh. Yeah. It is.
Well, now that you say it, she has been eating a lot of peanut butter too.
That's a protein.
Is it?
The protein.
Maybe I just don't feed her right.
That's probably it.
Well, I heard ramen noodles were good for you. I don't know.
Hormel chili in the can.
Yeah. Spam. It's got everything.
Yeah.
So tell us about this multiverse.
Oh, boy.
Now, give me what vision of the multiverse, because when we talk about different dimensions, different universes, there's always different ideas that people have. You know, I've heard people say that, like, ghosts that we see, we've had somebody on the show say that was like bleed through from another universe, from another dimension that we were seeing that's kind of laying on top of ours. That, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I've heard that one, and I've heard people talk about UFOs must be flitting in and out of from other universes and things like that.
I think we've had that idea too.
And and so I'll get to that in a minute. I mean, when I started this project, I really didn't know what to think. I'm a formally trained physicist, and so that means I learned some quantum mechanics, and I know a bit of cosmology, and so I knew that there were ideas about multiple universes in these areas of physics, but I really hadn't paid it a lot of attention. And when I set out to do the project, or what really got me to do the project, was when I looked into it at the advice of a friend, and I realized that there were lots of different ideas, many of which are scientific, driven from scientific theory, and some of which really have no basis at all in science as we know it, and I would call them more faith-based. So there are lots of different ideas, and so we have to think about what it is we mean when we talk about multiverse. And so the starting place is really, what do you mean when you talk about universe? Right? I mean, before you can talk about multiple ones, let's at least decide what we mean when we talk about a single one.
Okay.
And so for me, I define that as everything that we could ever possibly experience. Taste, feel, smell, build an instrument to detect, or whatever. And if we can think of a reality that is beyond that, then we would call that a multiverse, okay? And so you might imagine that the great reality out there is vastly larger than our observable universe because of the finite speed of light. There's a finite part of the reality that's out there that we would ever be able to experience. Space is expanding, and it turns out it expands faster away from us the further away you go. This is the whole expanding universe bit. And it turns out that as you get far enough away, space is expanding away from us faster than the speed of light, actually, which means there's really a finite piece of the great reality that we can experience.
Uh-huh.
So that is a form of a multiple universe, because you can imagine if you could establish, for example, that the great reality is indeed larger than that observable universe piece that we can experience.
Now, when we talk about universe, are we talking like when we talk about multiverse? Let me say, when we go into universe, are we talking about our space, our outer space? I mean, like all this in one, and there are multiples of that.
You get different versions. Yeah. So there is a type of multiverse, which basically is the one I was just describing, where what we see, the physical laws that we see, and sort of the dimensionality we experience, all of that, we experience a finite piece of a much larger reality that shares all of those characteristics with us. So you could imagine that you could, if we could somehow step outside into that much bigger box, you could imagine having a bucket filled with marbles, and each of those marbles would be sort of the universe, the observable universe-sized piece of the existence that we can see. And so you could imagine having a very large number of similar-sized regions, and these regions of space might have the same basic physical laws and everything. But there are many other schemes where you can have situations where the constants of nature, the nature of the physical laws and things can actually be very different.
Now, what do you mean by that?
Well,
like in Universe B, water is green?
Well, I mean, it's more like the strength of gravity, the strength of the nuclear force, which determines the speed with which nuclear reactions happen in the center of stars. The strength of the electromagnetic force relative to gravitational force. So these are the things that basically govern reality as we see it. So, for example, at the start of the Big Bang, there was mostly just hydrogen, and still, even now, there's mostly just hydrogen in the universe. The heavy elements of which you and I are pretty familiar, most of that stuff actually was made in supernovas. So after stars evolve, they end up, many of them, if they're heavy enough, they become unstable, and they'll actually send out, in the process, they'll create the heavy elements that then can condense into other planets and things that we know and love. So one can argue that life as we know it could not possibly exist if you didn't have the physical laws such that stars can last a certain amount of time and undergo this process.
So outside our governing rules of what, I guess, makes our universe, life wouldn't be able to happen. Or life as we know it, rather. Right.
And so there are ways in which, and basically for the universe that we see, we physicists and scientists will go out and measure certain things like the strength of the electric force to the strength of gravity and things like this. And these are the things that sort of govern all the physical processes that we see. And so it turns out that there are schemes out there that are mostly string theory inspired, where the physical constants might be different in different pieces of the multiverse. So when you ask, is it the same as basically it's another something that's like what we are? That may be true or it may not be true, depending on which multiverse we're talking about. But let me come back for a moment because we started out with it. Let me come back for a moment to the UFOs and the ghosts that people talk about. If you think about my definition of universe, if you could actually see any evidence of something bleeding in from some other multiverse, they would be part of your universe. So almost by definition, it really can't be coming in from another universe by that definition. If you see what I mean, if you can see the ghost, then basically you have a causal connection.
So there's no way something from a different dimension or different universe. Okay, first is different universes and different dimensions. Are we talking about the same thing there?
Well, I mean, again, it's unfortunately not an easy thing to answer in a sense.
Well, I just don't want to misspeak.
There are different types of multiverses, and in one type, which is coming out of quantum mechanics, generally called the sort of many worlds theory, then we can think of being possibly sharing the same space, but being separated by other types of dimensions, which are useful in the mathematics where we are calculating quantum mechanics. So in a sense, there is a dimensional separation there, but in principle, we might overlap in sort of in three space, but we can't experience or see the other pieces, and within that series, the reality stream in which we can't connect with the others. There's no way that we know how to do that. So I think that's sort of by construction. So I don't think there's a way. Now, one hopes we don't always, that we don't know everything and that maybe we'll discover things. But if we could connect to it, one of the things I'm saying is it then would become part of our universe in a sense. So it's not really a multiverse idea. There are other places where dimensions come into play. So in string theory, which is a powerful... I'm sorry?
I think, I don't know if you read Stephen King, but he's got this new book kind of about the assassination of Kennedy. And it does have it plays into string theory, I think, pretty well. And by the end of the book, you really understand. For me, anyway, I really understood string theory a lot better on how, the different universes in that aspect of string theory would work.
That's cool. I haven't read that book.
Just in case if you, need to explain it, I mean, that book is pretty good. It's an interesting read.
I'll have to pick that up. But it turns out that string theory is basically a theory that tries to explain the reality that we live in geometrically, in a sense, and you basically construct reality out of little. Well, it started out as thinking of particles as little strings, and when they pursued the mathematics, I mean, it got vastly more complex than that. But one of the things they found was to have a theory that is anything that has some of the characteristics that we know it would have to have if it were going to be a theory that described the world in which we live. It actually turns out that it has to be in about 10 dimensions. And, of course, we live in a four-dimensional world if you take the three spatial dimensions plus time. Yeah. And so within these theories, they actually have to, in a sense, get rid of those other 6 dimensions. And they do it through a technique they sort of generically call compactification. So you can get a little sense of what it is. If you imagine a sheet of paper, that's a two-dimensional plane. It's a two-dimensional object. And if you roll it up into, if you take one end and turn it so that it meets the other end so that it looks like just a rolled-up piece of paper.
No, I'm doing it with a sheet of paper as you tell me.
Okay, and then if you just imagine having the radius of that cylinder that you're holding in your hand shrink to something very small, or if you imagine taking that rolled up piece of paper and walking very, very far away from it. In either case, what you would then see is something that looks one-dimensional, like a hair or something, right? Because you're so far away relative to the radius of that cylinder. It would look like a line. So in this way, you have actually taken a two-dimensional object, and by shrinking that radius of the cylinder down to something very small, you have sort of lost one of those dimensions, and you now see it as a one-dimensional object. So the idea in string theory is you play that kind of game. So if we were able to probe the structure of space at really, really small distances, we might actually see those extra dimensions. But when you're somebody as big as, say, we are, you don't perceive them. And this isn't completely crazy, right? I mean, geometry is sort of weird that way. The Earth looks flat to us, right? But if you because it's so big. But if it were a good bit smaller, it would look round.
Yes.
So, these perspective games are pretty important. But the funny thing is, in string theory, is it turns out there are lots of different ways in which you can do this mathematical compactification of these 6 extra dimensions. And it turns out that the way in which you do that actually determines the physical constants of the space in which you're living. So if you were able to sort of, and it turns out that there's something like 10 to the 500 different ways to do this. So when we were talking about multiverses with different physical constants, that was a little bit of what I was alluding to, because in cosmology, there are reasons to believe that the universe that we experience is perhaps something that's basically like a bubble in an inflating matrix of space, which is inflating really, really, really fast. And in locations, you'll have little changes in the structure of the space-time as it's inflating, which will actually cause it to stop expanding so fast, and it would slow down a lot and become something that looks like our universe. But in the process of doing that, the space-time might differ a little bit everywhere that thing might happen. And if so, you could actually have different physical constants in many of these different regions. And so this is an idea called the bubble multiverse. So it's pretty bizarre stuff, and I've now forgotten how we ended up going into string theory.
I asked about that. Now, when you talk, we had somebody, I want to say just a few weeks ago, talking about different dimensions.
Yeah.
And the way they explained it was that it was actually like a bubble, like that would happen in our dimension and would affect everything around it. But
because of gravitational pull. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure. I mean, part of the problem is I'm handicapped by being a physics nerd, right? Because for us, dimensions are pretty well-established sort of things. I mean, there is the reality of the dimensions that we live in. So we know we live in 3 dimensions because if you wanted to locate anything in the space in which you live, you need 3 numbers. So if you go to the grocery store, for example, and you ask somebody where are the corn nuts, the manager's going to say, well, you want to go down to aisle 4, go about halfway down the aisle, and then it's up on the 3rd shelf. It's those 3, those 3 coordinates, basically. That's what you need in order to specify where something is. And then it's actually 4 coordinates because you also have to specify the time. The corn nuts weren't there yesterday, but they are there today, for example. So that's really what we mean when we talk about dimensions in the, basically in the world in which we live. The problem is in physics and in mathematics, those things turn into basically coordinates, mathematical coordinates, and it's trivial to dream up a theory or have reason to have many more coordinates than just 3 or 4. So to mathematicians and physicists, really the idea of dimensionality is, I don't know what's sort of more trivial than it is in real life. Right?
Now, when we talk about the multiverse, in a different aspect, are we talking like there's another Stephen Manley living in Universe B who is with the has the same kids and
well, maybe. I mean, certainly some people are talking about that. So let me and it can be, you can picture this in a couple of different types of multiverses, but let me just pick out one which I think is actually conceptually the simplest.
Okay.
Let us imagine, for example, that the great reality in which we live is vastly larger than the little portion of the universe in which we are able to observe things. Okay?
Okay.
And will always be that way. So in other words, we're only able to experience this little corner of the great reality. There is cosmology that feeds into the Big Bang Theory. The basic idea is that, in a nutshell, the universe starts out really tiny, and then it basically is something like a quantum fluctuation in energy that then undergoes a really vast and fast expansion. And as it expands, you'll get little fluctuations in energy, which naturally come about in quantum mechanics, but these little fluctuations, so that means in some places you might be a little hotter, in other places a little cooler. But this pattern then gets blown up really big by our standards, basically instantaneously. And in doing so, you create regions of this great reality. It's now vastly larger than anything we'll ever experience, but you'll create sort of a structure, hot and cold regions, that then basically will condense into matter, and it's basically what gives us the initial structure in the universe that we perceive that's evolved. Now, this sort of sounds like a crazy idea. It's called inflation, and it turns out that we can actually look out at the light emitted in the early stages of the Big Bang, which we call the cosmic microwave background, and we can see evidence for this structure. So it's not a crazy idea, and it does actually connect with current scientific thinking. And so, at any rate, what this means is that the area in which we live, for example, basically started out as a set of these random structures of matter in the early stage of the universe, and then it basically evolved. And so the thought is that if you had an infinite number of regions of space in a great reality, basically you would have a finite number of possible starting conditions, in which case you basically could argue that there would be somewhere out in the great reality an area where the condition was exactly like what we're experiencing here. And in that region you would have a you talking to a me, etc. So it's a pretty weird idea, and you'll have all iterations of that. So in this particular idea, where you have a great reality that's effectively infinitely larger than the piece of the great reality that we will ever experience, is basically what we would call our universe. Anything that could happen using the same physical laws that we have would happen. And so, you might have one where Al Gore became president, one where Elvis is alive, and, a place where you're talking to me. And so I think it was Max Tegmark, a physicist at MIT, has got I think I read a paper where he basically did calculations estimating the distance, using statistical techniques between us and the nearest identical us. And, of course, these distances are just outrageously, unimaginably big. But it's just
so it's kind of like somewhere out there in space. I mean, is that what we're talking? Somewhere out there far?
In this particular type of multiverse, the separation between these so-called different regions of the great reality, which I'm sort of referring to as universes, is really distance. It's just there's just so far apart that there always will be causally disconnected. There are other schemes. Like
I don't know if my brain just swelled right there for a second, or if I got a new wrinkle.
No, I get that. I get it.
But where is it, Steve?
You're not going to find it, Jordan.
Well, you can travel forever, and you will never reach there. And the reason for that really is that the space is expanding faster than you can travel.
That's right. Yeah.
And so I mean, and we observe that if you take a big telescope and you look out, we actually see that galaxies that are far away from us are actually moving away from us, and they're moving away from us faster and faster as we look further and further out in space. So we know that space is expanding, and so oddly enough, as you go far enough out, it's actually expanding away from us faster than you could ever go to try to get there. So you'll never reach one of those regions in space.
Because they're always moving farther from us.
Yeah, so that's what I mean when I say it's causally disconnected. Now, this is only one of, I think I do talk about 11 different types of multiverses in the book, Visions of the Multiverse. And the idea, just so people know, the idea was to try to make the subject very approachable. So unlike a short interview like this, where it's really hard for me to try to paint a clear picture.
Sorry to put you under the gun there.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I mean, I'm used to it. But the point is, in the book, I try to do it, very carefully and give more background and everything, so that the idea is to try to make the reader feel pretty warm and fuzzy about some of these crazy things, and in the process, actually discuss a lot of the scientific background, which makes this subject not crazy like it used to be. I mean, there are a number of these multiverses. It's hard to say that they're scientifically supported. I mean, you really can't say that. And the reason you can't is because I can't step outside and give you scientific evidence of the existence of one of these other universes. Because if I could, then it'd be part of our universe. I mean, the whole idea with the multiverse is it's causally disconnected from us. I can't build anything to go and
kind of like
bring back evidence.
Faith. You just have to have
well, that's the thing. So, is it science, or is it philosophy, or is it religion? And I distinguish things a little bit. I think there are some things that fit my definition of multiverse, which I think we would all agree are just a matter of faith. So, for example, heaven and hell.
Yeah.
If you think about it, these are other planes of existence that many people truly believe in, but we can't have a causal, direct connection with it. I mean, you might argue that somehow God might make something happen, but basically we'll go around all that we want, and nobody... I can't build an experiment that's going to go to hell, take some pictures, and come back and give us evidence of it, right?
Kind of one of those, like you said before, you can't step out and research it yourself, so it's hard to...
Right. So I consider that, I mean, it sort of fits a multiverse definition, but it has nothing to do with science, okay? And the same, I would say, is true of this idea of these ghosts. If people want to believe in these other planes of existence, well, fine. But some of these multiverse ideas are really based on the scientific theory as best we know it. Quantum mechanics is extremely well supported and understood in many ways in scientific circles. And one of the ways in which you can frame quantum mechanics, the so-called many worlds theory, actually has within it the idea of multiverses. I can't prove the multiverse piece, but the theory in and of itself works very well. And so, I can't say the multiverse part is really science, but I can say that there is a very well-supported scientific theory that sort of leads you to infer multiverses.
No, I actually, for me personally, because as a Christian, I understand multiverse a lot better after using the heaven and hell reference. Like my brain went, oh, I understood it better the way when you explained it like that. Like I get what you're saying now.
Well, that's what I mean. When I started this out, when I started out with this, I knew of the cosmology and the quantum mechanical one. So again, in cosmology, we have a pretty well-established theory of how the universe has evolved with the Big Bang, and this idea of inflation is something that's not yet fully demonstrated scientifically, but it's pretty compelling at this point, and yet. And from these, if you believe in this idea of inflation that is in cosmology these days, the multiverse basically just follows from it. I don't know that anyone knows of a way really to avoid the multiverse once you believe that particular aspect of the theory. That's not to say you can go out and prove it, but it's there. So so there are lots of different strange ideas that are out there, and they are, I mean, what's exciting to me is that many of them are driven by the leading scientific theories of the day. I mean, I think that when I started into this, I was thinking about the cosmology and the quantum mechanics because I'm a scientist.
Yeah.
But then I realized I had to define what I mean by multiverse and universe, and when I did that, I realized wow, well, how do I distinguish this thing in cosmology from religion or some mystic who thinks about, talking about different planes of existence or things like that. And so I invented a category in the book. I call them multiverses of faith, basically. And there they sort of fit my definitions. And they just differ because they aren't inferred from leading scientific theories, basically.
Yeah, I understand that. Like the out-of-body experience type of
right.
world you would live in. Like what's that movie, Insidious?
Right.
Where the guy has this out-of-body experience and he's actually walking in a plane of existence that's not the one he's used to.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah, so anyway, that's sort of the idea.
So there's no way you're saying that we could get any kind of bleed through, like people who are saying, okay, a ghost, isn't a bleed through from another, plane of existence, because that would then in turn be our plane of existence, which couldn't interact with the others.
Yeah, I mean, for the ones that are inferred from the scientific stuff, I mean, really by construction, they are causally disconnected. There's just no way to have a piece of one touch another or to get evidence of the other by construction. And in terms of the other types of multiverses, like heaven and hell or different planes of existence, I mean, I suppose in a sense they are what you want them to be because you're just deciding that you believe in them one way or the other. Mm-hmm. But sort of the way that I've defined universe and multiverse, if you were able to see any aspect, I mean, if a ghost popped in from some other part, one of these other planes, then really you are causally connected somehow. And therefore it really becomes part of your universe. So the whole idea, sort of by construction, doesn't really work that way, as far as I can tell.
Well, okay, so I should infer then that you don't believe in ghosts.
Well, he didn't say that. He just said that ghosts aren't from another dimension.
Yeah. I mean, I am a science geek. I do believe that there are things in this universe we do not understand, and that's what makes what we do as scientists fun.
Yeah.
If I saw a ghost, I would be so excited about it, because I'd want to know.
So would I.
I'd want to know, what's the deal? How do you operate? What's making you glow? What kind of forces do you react to? I would all of a sudden start wanting to prod and poke it and pull out all my instruments and try to figure out what makes it work. And
now, do you work in a lab?
I'm a particle physicist, so I actually work at the big accelerator labs.
Oh, that's fun.
Like Fermi Lab.
Okay, does that mean you're going to... Here's a little side clip, I guess. Black holes. Are you going to create them, and are you going to kill us all?
I guess not, since we're not dead yet.
Well, I mean, I know, with the big colliders.
The black hole thing is a red herring, because it turns out that if you were to create a little tiny black hole in one of these accelerators, there's a quantum mechanical process that basically would make it evaporate very quickly. Stephen Hawking came up with it. It's called Hawking radiation, actually. And so it turns out that if we did create black holes, we would see some spectacular signatures of particles streaming through our particle detectors that would make it very different from other things that we're used to seeing. But it wouldn't eat the Earth, for example. There are some other ideas that people need to think about.
What do you mean?
That aren't black holes. There are other types of particles.
There's things out there much worse.
Dreamt up. Well, they're different. They aren't black holes. But again, one way to think about it is the moon is still there, and it turns out that if you go out into outer space like the moon is, you are getting bombarded by high-energy particles coming from the sun and astrophysical sources.
It's solar winds, right? And
constantly, yeah. I mean, it's a constant bombardment at very high energies, in many instances much higher than we can achieve in the laboratory, right? So if if it were going to be commonplace that in high energy collisions of particles that you would create something that would, make a moon or an Earth evaporate, I mean, it would have happened long ago. So you can actually place limits on the probability of things happening like that.
But here's a big but. They do happen out in space.
Yeah, but things are still out there.
I'm just playing.
Well, okay. So black holes are not.
What about this dark?
What about a wormhole?
Big black holes coming from stars, that's a different sort of thing. It's not created by the collision of two highly energetic particles.
I was just messing with you. I was just messing with you.
Yeah.
What about this dark matter? Isn't that one thing that they're the particle collision is hoping to create?
Yeah, actually, we would love to do that. And dark matter would be quite different from the idea of a black hole in your living room. Dark matter, unfortunately, would not interact with anything. You wouldn't even be able to shine a light on it and see it. It would just basically fall right through your living room floor, and you'd never know it was there, for the most part.
Oh, gee, that's like my disaster of a living room all the time.
Yeah, mine too. So dark matter is really quite interesting because if you look at the motion of stars and galaxies, or galaxies in galactic clusters, it turns out that the way in which they move, from that we can infer that there's a great deal more mass there than we're able to account for with normal matter, basically. Huh. And so people have been talking about dark matter for, oh my gosh, about 50 years. Yeah. And the evidence has been slowly growing that there's some that comes from cosmological observations people have done in the last 10 years looking at light coming from the early stages of the Big Bang. And it turns out that lots of pieces fit together very nicely if you infer that about 80% of the mass that's in the universe doesn't interact with light, and it doesn't interact in any way that you and I would think of as normal matter interacting. The only way that the only thing it shares really with normal matter is that it feels gravity. And so this is what we call dark matter. And it makes it really hard to detect because we detect almost everything by the way in which it interacts with light, actually, in all the experiments and things that we do. So people are avidly looking for it, and it is one of those things where I think there's a fairly strong consensus in the physics community that it is probably there, and there is some consensus on its probable properties, but we have yet to really directly observe it, and really that's because it's so hard to observe. So there's a big effort to do that, and it's very exciting. But one of the ways in which it might be discovered is it could be that particles of dark matter happen to have a very large mass, and at the Large Hadron Collider, for example, we might have put in enough energy that we can actually create dark matter particles in and amongst the other particles that we create in these collisions. And there are ways in which you can infer that you did create them within those collisions. Basically, they'll carry away some of the energy and momentum in ways that you wouldn't normally see. So we can identify it. So there is a hope that we might be able to directly produce dark matter particles.
Well, let me ask you this: what does happen? I mean, you go to work every day just like the rest of us. Are you constantly trying, or is that just a cool side effect that might happen one day? Like, what is it that actually happens when you collide the particles? Well,
basically, you're putting a lot of energy in a very small place, and Einstein has told us, E equals mc squared. So there's an energy mass equivalent. So if you put enough energy in a small place, you can basically create particles of higher and higher mass. And that's what we're trying to do, and we're trying to understand them. And it's not as if they've never been in the universe before, because with the idea of the big expanding universe, if you go backwards in time, the universe used to be much smaller and hotter and denser, and the energy density was vastly higher. So in fact, much higher than we can achieve in a laboratory. So it turns out that the universe itself used to have the typical interaction between particles, happened to be at energies that were the kind of energies that we try to achieve in accelerators. So you can think of these accelerators really as small time machines where we're going back and trying to study the types of particles and forces that were present in the very earliest stages of the Big Bang. So if we really want to understand the early stage of the universe, then we have to understand the nature of the particles and the forces, and so that's sort of part of the game. And I think it's sort of cool because we're trying to study the really small, tiny particles, and in a sense, we're actually also studying the largest things that we know, the actual evolution of the universe itself. So that's sort of neat. But at any rate, if I take an accelerator and I put all this energy in a very small space, it will actually it can create very massive particles, which we can then study because they'll decay into lighter particles, and in essence, they'll sort of explode. But they're so tiny, it's not like a real explosion.
It's not fun explosions. It's just kind of they're gone.
More,
like
they're just. So one way to think about it, I sort of think of it as you can almost think of it as car crashes. You just smash two cars into each other, and then you can come out after the fact and look where all the pieces went and sort of try to reconstruct what happened in the car crash. So in a sense, that's what we do with our...
Is it kind of the thought that the Big Bang was two giant particles that just smashed right into each other, and this was what we have is the particles left over? Is that...
No,
I'm full of crap.
Nah,
I don't know. I'm trying to wrap my brain around. Listen, you're a lot smarter than I am, and I'm trying to wrap my brain around what's going on.
No, I respect that, and in fact, I have a book you should read.
I know
because in the book, I do try to sort of lead people through this stuff. No mathematics; it's all conceptual. And it's really hard to do, in a couple of minutes is the problem with it. And that's actually what drove me to write the book. I mean, there are books out there that cover a lot of these topics, but not sort of with the overview that I was trying to give. And sometimes some of these really good physics books that are out there, and they're phenomenal, are sometimes written by authors who have a little bit of their own theoretical axe to grind on a particular topic or so, and so they sort of focus mostly on that point of view. And I wanted to be a bit broader, and I also wanted to make it a bit more accessible than most of the stuff.
More user-friendly.
Yeah, that was the idea.
Well, I mean, for a lot of people, if they open up a book like that and it's all full of math, it's a turn-off. I mean, it'd be a turn-off for me just because I can't wrap my head around a big math problem.
Well, if you don't have even a basic understanding, like me, of quantum physics and even the Big Bang Theory. Now, grew up with that theory out there, but I have not a clue.
Well,
really, what it
try the book and let me know what you think. I mean, I tried to write it for the basic
people
educated
like us,
non-expert. Okay, somebody who you can chew gum and tie your shoes, but you're not up on the latest in scientific lingo.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, right? I mean, we all have our own places, and scientists are notoriously awful about it, right? You get so used. I mean, it's not just the math, although the math makes it much worse. If you go and sit around a dinner table with a bunch of scientists, no matter what area they're talking, it's layers and layers of lingo is the thing. And the different layers of lingo can be very powerful, and it can enable the conversation to happen. But it also sort of isolates the speaker from the rest of the world in a sense. And so it's really it's very difficult to when you've been speaking that lingo and hanging out with friends who are doing this stuff day in and day out all the time, you get up in front of your class or whoever you're talking to, and sometimes you just forget where you are, and it becomes actually hard to rip away those many years of those different layers and speak in the right language. And it's unfortunate because a lot of scientists, a lot of academics, I mean, they're doing really phenomenal things, but
people don't
it's not a skill set everybody has.
Yeah.
So I really have a lot of respect for the great communicators out there who can manage to strip that stuff away and then paint the conceptual pictures that are important and lead the reader into an understanding of what's actually going on without getting lost in the layers of language.
Well, okay, go ahead.
Well, I just heard this very same discussion, only it was about modern art. That, the critics and collectors and gallery owners and the artists themselves all have this very specific way of talking about it and discussing things. And to the average person that walks in off the street, if they start trying to describe this stuff, you're clueless.
Oh, I think it's true for most groups. My ex-wife was a pharmacist, is a pharmacist, and she's a great woman, a great pharmacist. But I was in a car with her and 3 or 4 of her pharmacy friends, and my God, you would have thought they were talking a totally different language. They would laugh because they made a joke, but they were using some of this sort of internal pharmacy jargon, which it turns out that they have one of the reasons that prescriptions are so opaque to the rest of us. They have sort of I think it's a Latin-based code that they use as a shorthand.
Yeah.
So, and I'm going to get this wrong, and if there's anybody in medical listening, please, I apologize. But, they'll use BID, and what it means to them is, I forget, take as needed or twice a day or something like that. But instead of writing it out, right, they use this little code. And so they'll talk that way, too. That's the thing. And so I think everybody naturally does this. And, fortunately, musicians may be that way, but we can all sort of appreciate music when we hear it, even if we're not experts in it.
As a musician, especially when we're talking to, like, sound guys, and we're, trying to do our sound checks, it's a lot different than how we talk to other people.
Well, but when how do you actually formally communicate as musicians? Well, you do that with sheet music, or you have your own language, which you use to encode the music, which you can then pass on to some other musician, and that's really not any different from, in a sense, what we do with our mathematics and physics. I mean, that's our way of describing what it is that we're trying to do, and we have to use that language because it's very precise, and we want to be as precise as possible. And it turns out that math also allows you to do things that English wouldn't allow you to conceive of. I mean, we can actually do some pretty cool things with it. But that's this language that we use. But the nice thing about music is I can be a complete musical imbecile, and I can appreciate a piece of music. Now, admittedly, I may not appreciate it in the same way that you would if you're a musician, right?
Yeah.
There may be something quite different there. But as the problem with physics and things that are really mathematical based is it's hard to appreciate their beauty if you're not an expert. Is a bit of the issue. So the idea with the book is to try to paint the concepts and get away from the math and the complicated lingo.
Well, I will say we've had a number of physicists on here, and you are by far the easiest to talk to.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, thank you.
And I mean, we've had one where I've sat here cross-eyed with smoke coming out of my ears, typing Lola on Instant Messenger across the room saying, I have no clue, I'm lost. And Lola taking her headphones off, say, I got nothing, and walk outside. And let the guy talk.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, because, I don't want to say dumb it up for us.
Well, but
you talk on our level.
Real people.
Well, I mean, I don't consider it dumbing up. I mean, we lose a lot in translation. That's true. But, I think actually it's harder to rip away the lingo and leave the concept behind than it is to just use the lingo. But then when you do that, you haven't actually communicated anything.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. I mean, we live in a world that is affected by lots of things, and the science is a great thing we can use to understand it, and we can use it to try to fight it. I mean, think of global warming.
Yeah.
I mean, we might well be on the verge of making the Earth unlivable, and people are arguing over whether this thing actually exists or not, and whether this. I mean, the scientists. They steal the emails, and there's this whole process of science that happens, because, I mean, you never have things that are black and white in science. You have to sort of take little steps, and then you go backwards, and then you take other steps, and there is this process. And, of course, I think if you step back and you look at all the exchanges of emails on any process of science, you would think, oh my God, what a bunch of crazy nuts. But in the end, you do sort of march forward. And most scientists, one of the things that sets them apart is most of them have a lot of integrity, and they don't normally go out and make a lot of money being scientists. They have this currency, which is sort of, in a sense, scientific honor. And so, for the most part, they're going to do the right thing. So when I heard about some of the stuff that was in these emails that were coming out with ClimateGate, I wasn't very excited about it. It's like, yeah, well, that's the way science is. But to then, allow that to call into question. And the problem is all the debate is about business and this and that.
Yes.
And the science is just totally lost. And part of the problem, really, I think, are the scientists, right? We can't actually make the conversation about the science because we get so caught up in all the layers of language and technical stuff, and it's really a shame. And that's just one of many examples. So I wish scientists were better at somehow
communicating
things. I mean, there are lots of good people out there who do it, so maybe I'm just lamenting.
Well, you're one of them.
Well, and, lots of people aren't that interested. My book's not a bestseller, so I don't know.
We are out of time. Where can we get your book?
Yes.
Well, I mean, basically, if you just Google it, it's certainly in Amazon and Barnes & Noble and places
it's called
like
Visions of the Multiverse.
Visions of the Multiverse.
Okay.
That'd be good. Stephen Manley, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for dumbing it up.
We'll read your book, and then we'll get back to you, and you can come back and explain to us everything that we have just read.
Oh, no. It doesn't work that way. You read the book, and then I come back, and then you explain it all to me.
Oh, gosh.
I see.
You must be a teacher, too. Were you ever a teacher?
That's how it works.
Right.
And a glutton for punishment, but that,
Well, at least then I know I did it. I wrote the right book then.
That's true.
That's funny. All right, Stephen Manley, thank you very much, sir.
Yes,
my pleasure.
Visions of the Multiverse. And we are a little over time, so we are going to go. Until next week, everybody, don't be afraid, only believe.